Hey guys, today's video is all about the new faction, the Supreme Arbiters. This is the Forerunner server, so it won't be on the global server just yet, probably within the next month or two. It's kind of hard to predict, but yeah, it's not on global just yet. Anyway, specifically they have added 4 new heroes to the Forerunner server currently, but there are more Arbiters to come. And of course we have Valkyra and Constance who are added to this faction. As there are 4 heroes, I'm going to split this into 2 videos to make it a bit cleaner, I think. Otherwise they'll probably be quite long. So this video will be focused on the Legendary Lord and the Marksman, who I think they're all very good. Just as a quick disclaimer, I'll give you my overall thoughts of the faction. I've read over their skills, I've read over their awakenings. I think they're a bit overtuned, to be honest. They seem kind of insane to me at the moment. I believe these are only available with the Ancient Summoning Shards, but let's just take a quick look. Yeah, there we go. Praetus is there. He's the Legendary Lord. Then we have Praetus Pelagios and Pneumonia, I'm going to call her. So those are the 4 new heroes, and you can see they're available with Ancient Shards. And if we go to the normal summoning pool, we can see that they are not added here. Constance and Boreas are the last ones on here at the moment. So unfortunately, they are only available with Ancient Summoning Shards. So that is the gist of the faction. They are a new faction, basically the same as Chaos. You can think of these as light and dark, if you will. A lot more are going to be coming in future. The Legendary Lord is Praetus. There are no epic heroes at the moment. So we'll start with Praetus. But before we begin with him, let's look at his Legendary Lord bonuses. So faction allies 15% base stats. That's standard. But this is insane. Gains 1 divinity every 15 seconds with a cap of 3. You can consume all divinity to cast Lightning of Truth. And Lightning of Truth causes either Verdict of Truth 1, 2, or Final Verdict, so 3, according to the divinity consumed. So there's a few things to this. We'll look at the actual tooltips in a second. The first is you gain these charges once every 15 seconds, passively. So 45 seconds takes you to max stacks and you can use Final Verdict. The second and most important thing to me is you can consume all divinity. The wording makes it sound like this is an ability. It is not his ultimate. So does this Lord have a second skill? Is it basically a second ultimate that he gets that just charges passively over time? You can't control this with rage regen or rage boosters, so it's a fixed timed ult, basically. Every 45 seconds you can blow the Final Verdict, or 15-second intervals you can do the other ones. And each time he does use divinity to cast one of these verdicts, all faction allies will gain Sacred Blessing, which is 8 seconds of 50% damage bonus, including true damage. And it's because they are a true damage focused faction. You see a lot of true damage throughout their kits. So let's have a look at the verdicts now. So the first verdict is, for every 1 faction ally present, you deal true damage equal to 100% of the Lord's attack to random enemies 2 times. So if you have a team of 5 of this faction, so probably Constance, Valkyra, Praetus, and then 2 of the other ones released. There's only 6 at the moment. It reads like you'll be doing 100% damage 10 times is how it comes across to me, because it's basically multiplying this amount, right? So that's how it reads to me. I don't think it's 500% 2 times. It reads like it's 100% 10 times. But we'll have to see when someone finally wails for this hero and we see what actually happens, or when they're given to us on test server. They are available in test, but we haven't been given the heroes to actually test, unfortunately. So that already seems pretty strong to me. It's not incredible, it's random, and it's 100% of the Lord's attack. I don't know if it can crit, because it says of the Lord's attack, so I'm not sure. It probably can crit, but I don't know. And then the second version goes from 100% to 150%. It goes from 2 times to 3 times, and it inflicts a ½ second stun. So it says random enemies, so I'm assuming each hit is a ½ second stun. So depending on how rapid these are fired, if they're staggered, then it becomes a 1½ second stun on a single enemy, right? So that's potentially very, very powerful just for CCing a single target. Verdict of Truth is a total of 200% damage, and Verdict of Truth 2 is 450% damage, as well as a 1½ second distributed stun. Finally, Final Verdict is 200% of the Lord's attack as true damage, 4 targets, and it inflicts a ½ second stun as well. So we gain another 50%, and we've gained another instance of damage. And the Sacred Blessing, this passive here, has a longer duration if it is applied via the Final Verdict. Doesn't say how much, because of course it doesn't, but we can assume it's probably around 10 seconds because they like nice round numbers. So that's just the Lord's skill. That's not actually his kit at all. And I think that's very good. Every 45 seconds, for every 1 faction ally present, 200% true damage based on the Lord's attack to random enemies 4 times and a stun. And you're also buffing faction allies with 50% to all damage done for I'm guessing 10 seconds at final verdict. That's very good. That's really, really powerful. That's actually kind of nuts. Okay, so finally, let's move on to actually looking at Praetus. This is Praetus. He is the legendary lord of the Arbiter Faction. And the first thing to do is look at his stat line. This base attack, 5265, is now the highest attack in the game for a mage. It beats Kriya. However, unlike Kriya, I don't think he sucks. So this guy has a standard attack interval, standard rage cap, standard rage regen. He has high cost. The only negative I've seen on this faction is their cost is quite high across the board. Pretty much all of them have 20 to 25 cost. So that is not a great point. But anyway, let's move on to his actual skills. When eliminating an enemy or casting an ultimate, increases damage, including true damage, by 10% and max HP by 10%, permanently stacking up to 5 times. So after 5 ultimates or 5 enemies slain, or a combination of the two, he will have 50% damage increase and 50% more max HP. His base HP is actually pretty good for a mage as well. This is actually reasonable HP. So he's actually be a very tanky mage. He's going to have a whole load of attack. He's going to have a bunch of damage bonuses. He's going to be giving himself another damage bonus as well from his own Lord benefit. Remember, this one over here is going to get Sacred Blessing. So without having any skills, he's already gaining a bunch of stats and a bunch of damage increase. Basic attack is just 100% to one enemy. So this is a very standard mage attack. His attack range, if we saw earlier, is it's kind of the standard / kind of worst attack range for a mage. It's quite common, but the better one is one with the corners, of course. So this is not ideal. And then his ultimate, Divine Truth. 800 rage cap, can be reduced to 700 with skill ups. Duration of 10 seconds, can go up to 16 seconds with skill ups. During the ultimate, Divine Truth increases attack by 30%. So basically Power of Dominance or a tier of Starlight. And if there is only one enemy in range, he inflicts 3 stacks of Radiant Erosion. If there is more than one enemy in range, it inflicts Chain of Fate and 1 stack of Radiant Erosion on up to 3 enemies instead. So there's obviously 2 big keywords there, Radiant Erosion and Chain of Fate. So Chain of Fate is unique to Praetus. Radiant Erosion is actually common throughout all of these new heroes. All of them have effects either applying or benefiting from enemies being inflicted with Radiant Erosion. So what does Radiant Erosion actually do? It is a debuff that lasts for 10 seconds and it deals true damage scaling on the target's defense every 2 seconds, and it stacks up to 3 stacks. I don't know why they use the word carrier. Maybe ChatGPT was having a bad day. Unfortunately, we don't know how much it scales off the target's defense. We don't know what the true damage actually is, so we'll just have to see and figure it out. But it's a 10-second debuff. It stacks up to 3 times and it's true damage every 2 seconds. So it's 5 instances of true damage. Seems pretty good, but we need to know how it scales to know if it's actually legitimate. And obviously, since it scales on the target's defense, it's not going to be particularly good on Guild Boss. It's going to be good in Artifact Material Raid, but you don't really have many platforms to place, so I don't think he's an AMR hero. It should be very good in Gear Raid 1, because those guys have very high resistance. It says based on the carrier's def, not magic resistance def, so we assume it's their defense, right? If it's scaling on their defense, and he does magic damage, and this is true damage anyway, it should absolutely obliterate Gear Raid 1. It's scaling on the target's defense. Their defense is astronomical. It's like over 20,000 flat. So this debuff, you would think, should absolutely crush Gear Raid 1. So the second part, so this is 3 stacks immediately. If he ults, he gains 30% attack for 10 to 16 seconds. And if there's only one enemy in range, he gives them 3 stacks of this debuff. If there is more than one enemy in range, he applies 1 stack to up to 3 enemies, and he also applies Chain of Fate to those 3 enemies. When a linked unit receives damage, the other linked units receive true damage equal to 50% of the inflicted damage. It lasts 10 seconds. This seems pretty crazy to me. Think of it this way. The lizards in Gear Raid 1, very high resistance, very high magic resistance, super tanky, really hard to kill. The other stuff in Gear Raid 1 is actually not that hard to kill. So you cast Chain of Fate when there's just, one of those guys and a trash mob left. You absolutely obliterate the trash mob, and now the linked enemies take 50% true damage. So you're dealing 50% of that amount to the lizards that have crazy resistance. It's just a cheat code. It lets you skip enemy resistance, basically. If you have a scenario where you can tie an enemy to an enemy with a weaker resistance, obviously you can't choose who you nuke, but mages splash. Once you nuke the first target with lower resistance, the higher resistance target is taking half of that amount as true damage, just skipping their resistance. We do need to see exactly how this true damage is implemented. I'll do some testing when I get a chance. It might still be applied the percentage resistance. It might just not be the flat. It probably will skip both, but we need to double check. This should be incredibly powerful. So I think this is the real powerhouse of his ultimate. 30% attack is nice, but I don't know. Because at the moment, this doesn't do any damage, right? Radiant Erosion does not scale on him at all. This scales on the target. Radiant Erosion has nothing to do with Praetus' stats. This is 10 seconds, it stacks 3 times, and it scales on the target's defense. So Praetus' stats don't matter here. I don't think his damage or his attack impact it in any way. So with his ultimate, what damage does he actually do? He just does a basic attack for 100%, right? So he's gaining, sure, he's gaining 50% damage here. He's gaining damage from his weird Lord benefit. He's gaining 30% attack here. But I think Chain of Fate is the real powerhouse in this ultimate. However, his passive, Eternal Decree, 20-second cooldown down to 10 seconds at max skill ups. Summons 1 Light of Judgment for each basic attack launched by the hero. Light of Judgment also deals 30% damage to the target. The hero can have up to 5 instances of Light of Judgment at the same time. So every 10 to 20 seconds, depending on skill ups, he summons a Light of Judgment. Every time he makes a basic attack, the Light of Judgment also makes an attack. The damage dealt by the Light of Judgment is 30% of his damage, and you can have 5 at once. So basically, every time he attacks after 50 seconds at max skill, he's dealing a bonus 150% damage. So let's look at the Light of Judgment. It just simply says a summon that attacks together with its summoner. So it's just 150% damage bonus, kind of stacked with him in multiple instances. It's pretty good. It's definitely pretty good. It means he's hitting 6 times whenever he attacks. If you paid attention, Immortal Codex is not far away. It's on Forerunner at the moment, and one of the bosses requires multi-hits to beat. This guy is going to be amazing for that, right? Every attack, he makes 6 attacks. I'm assuming that it says instance. But pretty clearly, it sounds like instances of damage. So that should be good. The damage from these actually doesn't seem incredible to me. 30% of his damage is not amazing. But I like the instances. I think it's going to be great for Immortal Codex. And generally, it's nice to get more damage. However, the final passive changes what I just said. Faithful Might. During his ultimate, so when he gets 30% attack bonus, the hero's basic attack deals an extra 40 to 60% true damage. So 60% true damage amp during his ult. And his Light of Judgment, the things we just talked about, the summons, deal 20 to 30% extra true damage. So now they're dealing 30% more damage, and it's true damage. So during his 16-second ultimate, his 5 adds are going to be dealing 30% damage and 30% true damage. Now they're actually pretty crazy, in my opinion. It reads pretty nuts. So that's his kit. And finally, he gets arena cost reduction of 5. So he goes down to 20 cost in arena, because the LD heroes in this game seem to like arena cost stuff. So that is his base kit. That is his skills and his stats. Overall, I think he seems pretty nuts. To me, he seems incredibly powerful. That's just so much true damage in his kit. That's a massive amount of attack instances for Immortal Codex. That is a nice amount of attack bonus. I mean, you can give him the Tear of Starlight and he'll have 60% attack bonus, which is just absurd for the mage with the highest base attack in the game. My only qualm with him, or my 2 qualms with him, one is his cost is high. This won't matter for Immortal Codex, and for quite a bit of content, it won't matter too much. The other thing is he doesn't really have multipliers. So his basic attack is a basic attack. His ult just gives him stats. These things are very low multipliers, and these are very low multipliers as well. The reason that matters is he's getting all this attack, and you're going to use a Dolores or a Constance with basically any team you use in this game. Multipliers make those attack bonuses, the inspiration bonuses, insanely powerful. So not having a high multiplier on his skills means he's not fully taking advantage of that massive amount of attack, because it goes through all of those multipliers, right? You go through, 800% damage nuke, and then 200, 300% crit damage. Like, it really blows these numbers out of control. So I think he's more of a rapid, consistent damage hero. I think you're going to want a good amount of attack speed on him. You're going to want to get 5 stacks of these Lights of Judgment in 50 seconds. You really want max skill. And you're going to want him to just absolutely blast things to bits with true damage. I think that's his strength. And I think Chain of Fate is just going to be absolutely incredible. So he's not going to be like a flashy nuker who ults and everything dies immediately. I think he's going to be very high, consistent DPS. And I think that's going to be very good. And it's nice as well, actually. It's kind of sort of similar to Nocturne, right? Rather than, the Vierna, the Karmets who just obliterate things in one go. I think Praetus is going to be really, really good for consistent high damage output. I don't know that this will enable a guild boss team. Inferno is too strong to knock off its pedestal. And Nightmare applies really good debuffs. And then we have Piercer with Silas just doing broken damage. But I mean, it's possible. It's possible that this faction could be good in Guild Boss as well. We'll have to see. Anyway, before we move off of Praetus, let's look at his Awakenings. When basic attack deals damage to targets inflicted with Radiant Erosion, so the debuff that he applies with his ultimate, he gains 3% rage. Remember, this lasts for 10 seconds. He has 2.6 interval. It's fair to say that you'll probably, I mean, if you're wailing for this guy, you probably want to be able to get his attack speed down to like 1.4, maybe 1.5 interval. So you can land as many attacks as you can, and you can get a pretty good amount of rage back off of that. I think it's fair to say you'll get maybe 6 to 7 attacks. So that's giving you a pretty decent amount of rage back. 18% rage-ish, roughly. So that's pretty good. I think that's pretty good. That's a nice amount of rage regen just during his Radiant Erosion. He's only applying it during his ultimate, though. So it depends how his ult works. I think his ult is a duration based, but it should still apply, actually. He should be getting it from then, so it's actually quite efficient. So it should be okay. It's not insane, though, I don't think. Second one is 5% attack and 5% faction allies attack as well. I mean, these are pretty much one of the best ones you can get for a faction, just giving them 5% attack. Some factions give 5% damage, and it's just like, why would you give them 5% damage over 5% attack? It kind of sucks. So yeah, this is the best one to get of the second Awakenings, I think. Third Awakening is when the number of Light of Judgment reaches 5. Just get 15% more attack, because he needs more attack, apparently. On top of his 30% he's getting, on top of all of the damage amps, he's getting just more attack. So this is going to be really powerful, I think. Fourth Awakening is Rage Regen Auto, sure. Fifth Awakening is every 15 strikes received from the Light of Judgment, so his ambient summons that zap things, the target receives 200% extra damage. Bear in mind, he'll have 5 stacks after 50 seconds. That means he only needs to make 3 attacks, because they all attack when he attacks, and then he deals an extra 200% true damage. So this seems kind of nuts to me. This now becomes every 3 attacks you deal 200% extra true damage, on top of, you know, all of his other damage sources and his damage amps and his true damage sources, his attack amps, all this crazy stuff, on top of the other Awakenings. So yeah, that's pretty nuts. And as I was saying, if you get him to like 1.5 attack interval every 4.5 seconds, you're going to be dealing 200% true damage nuke. This seems really good to me. I think his kit is insane. I think if you don't like having money, he's going to be incredible for you, because this is just, his Awakenings to me seem really good. I think they seem really, really good. Anyway, we're going to move off of Praetus, but let me know what you think of him below. Maybe there's something I've not considered. I think he's going to be really good for most content. And finally, for this video, I'm going to look at this hero here, who is Fat Poseidon Pelagios. He is Arbiter plus Piercer, so you can use him with Araka. And he has a Maul/Razark attack range. So looking at his base stats, he has 3982 attack. This is obviously the most important stat for these guys. And for reference, Maul has 3053, so this is nearly 1,000 attack more, like 900 attack more than Maul. However, Razark has 4017, so this is a little bit less attack than Razark. This is about 2k more HP than Razark, the same cost as Razark, the same attack interval, and the same rage regen. So very, very similar base stats to Razark, just higher defense, higher HP, slightly lower attack. So you can see the template there is pretty clear. So what does he do? Well, one of the first things to note is he does magic damage. He is not dealing physical damage, so he's not going to be as useful for Gear Raid 3 as Razark or Maul are. I think that's a good thing, an important thing to keep in mind. He is magic damage. However, he does have some true damage in his kit. So let's get started. Talent. Summons Tides every 12 seconds, dealing 200% true damage to targets in range with a 30% chance to inflict 1 stack of Radiant Erosion. So this debuff, again, all of these heroes are going to apply some kind of Radiant Erosion or do something with it. So basically every 12 seconds, 200% damage to targets in his massive range. And there's a 30% chance on hitting an enemy, I guess, to apply Radiant Erosion, or maybe it's to all enemies there's a 30% chance. We'll have to see. As time elapses in battle, the damage of the tides will increase gradually by an unknown amount, and its trigger interval will be shortened by an unknown amount, which is unfortunate again, but I mean, hey, that's pretty cool. So the longer the battle goes on, the shorter the interval between his tides and the greater the true damage. Seems pretty crazy to me. It seems pretty strong. It's just free true damage, right? Every 12 seconds, it's a 200% nuke. So it's a slower version of the A5 of Praetus, kind of. 200% true damage, right? They seem to like that number. Alright, so what does he do? Basic attack, 100% damage to multiple enemies. Just tell us how much multiple is. I'm guessing it's up to 10 enemies. Maybe it's up to 5. I think it's up to 10 enemies. This is the same kind of splash stuff that we see with Maul and Razark. His ultimate, though, let's look at this one. Poseidon's Fury. 700 rage cap, pretty low. Max skill, it goes to 600 rage cap. He starts at 400 starting range. So he's actually really close to firing his armor off immediately. Bearing in mind that Razak is 900 rage cap, 800 with skill ups. He starts at 700. So Razak is a bit closer at 800 versus 700. However, this is 600. It's a much more frequent cast. Well, Maul's is 500. So this guy is basically in between the two of them. His is 600 instead of 800 or 500. As for the actual damage though, this is a 400% up to 600% AoE damage multiplier, 10 enemies, and it inflicts 3 stacks of radiant erosion on the main target. So this specifically targets one enemy in range, it hits them and then it splashes out to 10 nearby enemies, and the main target is given 3 stacks of radiant erosion. So the main thing to note with this is 600% damage multiplier is pretty low. The max multiplier on Razak is 1000, a max skill ups, versus this 600, and Maul's is 900. So 1000 for Razak, 900 for Maul. Razak and Pelagios have similar base attack. Maul's is lower, but yeah, Razak's is quite a bit higher multiplier. Again, that's going to be going through Dolores' damage amp or Constance's damage amp more likely. So you really do want this multiplier to be higher. So on the face of it, it's a decent ult. It's applying radiant erosion, which is probably very good. But the damage isn't super high, so it's not going to be the same nuke we're used to seeing on Maul or on Razak. However, the talents, of course, come into play. The passives come into play. So the first passive, Ocean's Mark. Poseidon's Fury, which is his ultimate, has a 60% up to 80% chance to create Tidal Vortex at the target's location, lasting 3 to 5 seconds at max skill up. So what does Tidal Vortex do? Tidal Vortex consistently draws enemies towards its center, so it's like an Aeon type CC, dealing 100% AoE magic damage per second, so that's 500% AoE magic damage, right, at 5 seconds max skill up. And if the enemies are inflicted with Radiant Erosion, which is applied from his ultimate on the target you hit, and he can apply it as well passively with his talent, 1 stack of Radiant Erosion will be consumed to deal 600% true damage to the enemies. So that's pretty crazy. So if you compound all this together, you fire your ultimate, you deal a 600% nuke in AoE, you apply Radiant Erosion 3 stacks to one target, and then you have an 80% chance to create a vortex at the target you hit. That vortex will pull enemies in for 5 seconds, dealing 100% AoE damage per second, and if the enemies are inflicted with Radiant Erosion, a stack is consumed and they take 600% true damage. So I think it's per target. I think if each individual target has a stack, that individual target loses a stack and takes 600% true damage. I don't think one target has a stack so everyone takes the damage. I think it has to be per target, which makes it more balanced. If it was 10 targets take 600% true damage most of the time when he ults, on top of all these other things, it's insane. Either way, it's pretty insane. He has a couple ways of applying Radiant Erosion. Not super reliable in AoE though. It's only really a single target, and sometimes he can apply this with his Tide talent. So you would want to line it up. You would want to wait for the Tides to hit, then ult so you've got the most Radiant Erosions up, and then hope that your Tidal Vortex just absolutely eviscerates. But that is a lot of damage. There's a lot of damage. That is 600% AoE damage, 500% more damage from the CC over 5 seconds, and another 600% true damage nuke. So I know it takes time, this is 5 seconds instead of instant, but I mean Razak's ult takes like 5 seconds to channel anyway. This becomes 600 plus 500, 1100 plus 600 becomes 1700% damage, and of course 600% of that is true damage. That is now an insane nuke. Of course this is only applying 80% of the time, but I mean I like those odds, that's not too bad. And finally, his second passive also feeds into his ult because it needs to be even stronger somehow. When there are more than 5 enemies in range, his range is pretty big, there is a 30 up to 40% chance of casting Poseidon's Fury repeatedly on random enemies, Poseidon's Fury being his ultimate. This can be triggered at most 2 consecutive times. If there are more than 10 enemies, the trigger chance is doubled. If there's more than 10 enemies in range, at max skill it goes from 40% to 80% chance to trigger another cast of Poseidon's Fury. So, there's a bunch of stuff to discuss on this, but the first thing is the wording is kind of atrocious. It makes it sound like whenever, just there's more than 5 enemies in his range, he just suddenly has a chance to fire a bunch of stuff. I don't think that's the case. I don't think whenever X amount of enemies appear in his range, he suddenly just has a proc chance to maybe fire a whole bunch of stuff. Because, I mean, what happens if 5 enemies walk into range? Okay, so he has a 30% chance or 40% chance. 6 people walk in, I mean, does that trigger it again? Or does it have to be now there's 10 or 11, now it triggers again, the chance? I'm assuming it's when he ults. But I don't know, we'll have to see when someone pulls him or when he gets added to test as a playable hero we can test. My assumption is that when he ults, there is a chance based on the number of targets in his range to maybe trigger his ult again. But each time he triggers his ult, there is a chance to create a tidal vortex. This can trigger multiple times as well, his tidal barrage. I think you can have a total of 3 because it said it can be triggered at most twice. So the first one can trigger and the second one can trigger. So you'd end up with 3 ults. If you got lucky and everything fell in line, you cast his ult, it triggers fires again. Cast his ult, triggers fires again. That is now a 1800% AoE nuke. Then you're also getting 80% chance to apply tidal vortex. You're just going to absolutely obliterate everything. And I wonder if these tidal vortexes pull zones stack. Because it says, you know, draws enemies towards its center. Does it just become a massive vortex that sucks everything in? I'm curious, but it sounds overpowered as hell. It sounds incredibly strong. So far, Pelagios seems one of the most busted to me. I think they're all actually kind of insane, to be honest, but this seems very powerful to me. It's like I was saying earlier, modifiers matter a lot when you're using Constants or Dolores, and his modifiers are really quite big. 600% is not the biggest for this kind of type of hero, Maul/Resark, but then you have this as well with the 600% true damage, you have the 100% per second. It's just a bunch of stuff compounding, right? So I think his kit is kind of insane. Where would I use him? Well, his magic damage, he does have true damage. So I would definitely use him probably on the left side in Gear Raid 3. He might actually be able to be fine, but I don't know, maybe not. You'd probably just use him in Gear Raid 1. He would be a monster in Gear Raid 1. This much AoE damage in Gear Raid 1 plus the CC, plus this scaling erosion stacks that he can apply, the Radiant Erosion, which is on the target's defense, not magic resist. He should be ridiculous in Gear Raid 1. And of course the true damage as well. So yeah, he seems really insane. I think he'll be fantastic in Gear Raid 1. Not too sure where else I would use him. His cost is 22, which is pretty high. He does get 15% attack in Arena, just his final little sneaky passive there. So he should be really good in Arena for Airborne, for group stages. Yeah, I think he's going to be very, very good in general. So Pelagios seems to be one of the best ones. And let's have a look at his awakenings now. First awakening, each tide released restores an additional 10% rage. So that's his talent. Every 12 seconds he releases the tides. And when he does that, he gains 10% rage back. So every time he does it, he's going to be gaining 60 to 70 rage, which is pretty good. Like his ult's coming up pretty quick anyway. You're just going to be spamming that ult out as quick as you can with this. And the longer the battle goes on, the shorter the timer between his tides. So he's all about his ultimate. So any increase in that is going to be really, really good. Second awakening, 5% attack. I mean, that's perfect. Third awakening, Poseidon's Fury deals damage to 4 more targets. Kind of a random number, 4. It should be, you'd expect 5 or something, but sure. So his ult can now hit 14 targets, which is actually really quite nice. So it makes him even better for Gear Raid 1. His awakening 4, 8% crit rate. I think this is kind of funny. Imagine you've got a hero, one of the whaliest faction in the game. They've only just been added. They are ancient summoning shards. You pull 5 of this guy to get him to A4, and they're like, have 8% crit rate, because I'm sure you're early enough that you can't get 100% crit rate and good stats. Nope, this just seems a bit, I don't know, it seems a bit naff to me, but anyway, Awaken 5. Basic attack has a 10% chance to create a tidal vortex for 4 seconds. So that's obviously crazy. Now he just gets more chance to apply these massive area damages. Even if he doesn't have any Radiant Erosion stacks on the enemies, it's still 400% AoE damage to 10 targets. So it seems crazy. His kit seems crazy. The A5 seems crazy. Just a chance to apply tidal vortex. I mean, this is a CC as well, remember. This is not just old damage. It's actually CCing the enemies and pulling them. So I think Pelagios seems actually kind of insane. Anyway, that is it for the video. I'm going to cover the other 2 heroes in the next video, just to show you them quickly. This is Pneumonia, she's a healer, and this is Fallon, he is a pretentious elf. My thoughts in general from looking over these heroes and talking about them a bit with some people is that they are incredibly power creepy, they seem way too strong to me personally, and yeah, I don't know, they seem a bit too tuned. I think they're a bit too overtuned, considering Chaos Dominion heroes are already rare, and now they're adding a whole bunch of heroes into this faction that are also going to be incredibly rare. I'm hoping we get more Ancient Shards. I think we can get some from Immortal Codex quite reliably, so maybe the game is moving more towards these heroes that are slightly harder to pull, or quite a lot harder to pull, but we get more shards. I think that might be the direction. We'll have to see what happens. I think these heroes are cool. I like the designs. I like the skill kits. I think they're very comprehensive. They're very nice and synergistic between them, as you'll see when we go over the rest of them. I like the Awakenings. I think the Awakenings are very powerful. We've had some real dud Awakenings in the past, so I think they've done a much better job designing these heroes. but it does reek of power creep a bit. But I think it's a better design. I hope they continue designing things better in this way. We have some interesting designs, we have some interesting skill kits. So I like the design. I'm a bit concerned about the power creep, but overall I think they're pretty cool. Anyway, long enough video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments if you have any questions, concerns, thoughts, or if you think they're going to be really good in some content, because I need to think about these a bit. And I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. I'll record the next video and put it up probably the day after this one goes up. So yeah, thank you guys very much for watching. Have a great day. Take care and bye-bye.